I never imagined that the quiet sound of a closing door could feel like a punch to the chest, but that's exactly what happened the morning the last nanny quit. I was standing in the foyer of my home in Westlake Hills, just outside Austin, watching her drag her suitcase across the marble floor, while my quadruplets screamed somewhere upstairs, each one trying to outdo the others. She didn't even look back at me. Her eyes were red, her hair a mess, her hands shaking as she fumbled the keys into my palm. "It's not the kids," she said, her voice breaking. "It's the silence in this house." And then she was gone. I stayed frozen for at least a minute, maybe more. The truth was, I didn't understand her words. How could there be silence in my house when my children were practically tearing the place apart daily? But she wasn't talking about noise. She was talking about the silence between hearts, something I had become an expert at without meaning to. My name is Andrew Hale. I'm a billionaire, though I hate the word. I built a large-scale cloud infrastructure company from nothing during my 20s, and by 32, I had more money than I knew what to do with. My wife, Emily, used to say I was married to the future. She said it with a smile, not resentment, because she always believed my work was meant to make people's lives easier. I believed that too once. Then came the accident, a semi-truck on I-35, a phone call in the middle of a board meeting, a scream I didn't recognize as my own. After that, I threw myself into work with an obsession that bordered on self-destruction. But money flows easily when you're grieving. It distracts you. It gives you the illusion of control. I bought every toy, every tablet, every glowing screen that promised to keep my kids occupied so I wouldn't have to face the heartbreaking truth that I didn't know how to be both a father and a wounded man at the same time. My quadruplets, 2 boys, 2 girls, all conceived through IVF, went from sweet toddlers to emotional hurricanes. They fought constantly, threw tantrums that shook the windows, broke furniture, and bit anyone who tried to discipline them. They were hurting in ways they didn't have words for, and I was too afraid of my own grief to help them navigate theirs. Over the last 2 years, 23 nannies had walked through that door and out of our lives. 23. Some lasted weeks, others lasted days, a few lasted hours, and still I kept hiring them. Because that was the only way I knew how to fix things. Throw money at a problem until it goes away. Except, this problem never did. That morning, after the last nanny quit, I walked back into my office, a massive room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Austin, and closed the door so I wouldn't hear the kids screaming at each other upstairs. I told myself I needed to catch up on work. I told myself I needed quiet, but the truth was simpler. I didn't want to try again. I didn't want to fail as a father one more time, and I didn't want to look at 4 faces that reminded me so painfully of the woman I'd lost. But 30 minutes later, my assistant called. "Mr. Hale," she said, "the agency sent someone. She's downstairs." Already? That was fast. They said it's not a nanny, more like household help, but she's experienced with children. I almost cancelled. I didn't have the emotional energy to onboard another person who would leave before the week was out. But the screaming upstairs grew louder, and my chest tightened with that same mix of helplessness and exhaustion I felt every day. "Fine," I said. "Send her in." When I stepped into the foyer, I saw her standing there, a woman in a simple navy blue uniform holding a small, worn-out bag. She wasn't young, but she wasn't old either. Mid-30s, maybe. Latina with dark, calm eyes that seemed to study me without judging me. Her hair was pulled back in a braid, her posture straight but relaxed. "Mr. Hale?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Elena. The agency said you needed someone immediately." "I don't need a babysitter," I said quickly, defensive without knowing why, "just someone to help keep the house in order." Of course, she said. But something in her eyes made me think she understood more than she was letting on. Before I could say anything else, one of the quadruplets, Noah, came running down the stairs holding a broken tablet above his head like a trophy. "Dad, they broke it again! They always break my stuff!" he screamed. Then, without warning, he threw the tablet on the floor, shattering it completely. Seconds later, his twin sister Lily appeared behind him with tear-stained cheeks, and the other two weren't far behind, screaming accusations at each other over who started the fight. I felt the familiar panic rising in my chest, the sense of not knowing what to do, of being outnumbered and outmatched by 4 children whose pain I couldn't soothe. I opened my mouth to shout something, anything, even though yelling never worked, but before I could speak, Elena knelt down, not flinched, not froze, not panicked. She knelt, calmly and deliberately, right there on the marble floor, lowering herself to the kids' eye level. "Hey," she said gently but firmly, "one at a time. You're all talking, but nobody's listening, so start again, slowly." The kids stared at her, confused. No adult had ever spoken to them like that, steady, warm, but unshaken by the chaos. "I didn't break it," Lily said, sniffling. "He pushed me. She took my turn. You stole my game. You're always bossy." "Okay," Elena said, "too fast. Breathe first, all of you, now." I expected them to refuse, to scream, to run, but to my shock they actually copied her, 4 deep, shaky breaths. Then she said, "You don't have to agree, but you do have to calm down so you can talk." I felt like I was witnessing some kind of trick, something no one had managed in years. She asked them questions, simple ones, direct ones, and for the first time in a long time they answered her without screaming. When they were done, she stood and looked at me. "Sir, they need routine," she said quietly. "They need structure, and they need—" She paused as if weighing whether to continue. "They need someone who isn't afraid of their feelings." It was the closest thing to criticism I'd received in months, but somehow the truth in her tone made it sting less than it should have. I cleared my throat. "Well, fine. Do whatever you need to do." She nodded once. "Then I'll start by organizing the day." I almost laughed. Organizing the day? These kids were barely surviving the hour. But she didn't ask permission. She walked toward the kitchen and motioned for the kids to follow her. Surprisingly, they did. For the next 2 hours, the house, my house, felt different. Not quiet, but calmer. Less like a battlefield. More like a home trying to remember how to breathe. From my office upstairs, I listened to faint sounds drifting from the kitchen. The kids arguing less harshly. Elena's steady voice guiding them. A sound I hadn't heard in years. Children laughing, just a little. But it was there. I found myself walking to the security monitor on my desk, something I almost never did. I clicked on the kitchen camera. There she was, teaching them how to make their own sandwiches, not servants, not chefs, them. She made them wash their hands properly. She made them wait their turns. She made them share ingredients. No fancy reward charts. No bribes. Just presence. Just attention. They didn't look like spoiled rich kids. They looked like children craving connection. And I didn't know whether to feel relieved or ashamed. When one of the boys struggled to spread peanut butter, she placed her hand gently on his and said, "You don't have to get it right. You just have to keep trying." Something tightened in my throat, because those were words Emily would have said. Those were words I hadn't used in a long time. I turned off the monitor. My emotions were too close to the surface, too raw, too uncomfortable. I told myself it was good. They were occupied. It meant more work time for me. It meant stability, even if temporary, but deep down, I felt something else, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Hope. I didn't know then that this woman, this calm, steady maid with the quiet eyes, was about to unravel every wall I'd built. That she was about to force me to face parts of myself I'd spent years burying. That she would reach into the silence the nanny spoke about and make me hear it for the first time. All I knew was this. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't terrified of going downstairs, and that alone was shocking enough. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm or kids screaming or a business notification, but because the house felt different. I couldn't explain it at first. There was still noise, quiet footsteps, chairs moving, faint voices, but the tone had shifted. It wasn't chaos. It was activity, life, something I hadn't felt in a long time. When I went downstairs, I saw Elena in the kitchen, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, preparing breakfast while the kids sat around the table. Actually sat, not climbing, not fighting, not throwing food. They were coloring something on paper placemats she must have put out. "Good morning, Daddy," Lily said without shouting. I blinked. It had been so long since any of them had said that so naturally that it almost felt wrong, like I had stepped into someone else's house by mistake. "Good morning," I said, awkwardly. "You want some eggs?" one of the boys asked. Not yelling, not demanding, just asking. "Yes," I said, almost too quickly. I stood there watching as the kids ate, occasionally bickering but never escalating into full-blown war. Elena moved around the kitchen with a calm purpose that made everything else seem slower. The way she handled the kids wasn't about controlling them. It was about guiding them. She gave choices instead of orders, redirection instead of threats. When they finished, she handed each child a small task. Throw away your napkin, rinse your dish, push your chair in. And they did it, clumsily, imperfectly, but willingly. I didn't know what to make of it. It had only been 24 hours. After breakfast, I went back upstairs to pretend to work. But I found myself doing what I never do, opening the security app again. She had taken them outside. The backyard was huge. A swimming pool, a trampoline, a small playground, and a lawn big enough for a soccer team. But none of those things had ever meant anything to my kids. Most days they just stared at screens or fought over toys. But now they were gardening. I watched, stunned, as Elena guided them to dig small holes in the soil of the old abandoned garden bed I kept telling myself I'd hire someone to restore. She taught them to break the dirt apart gently. She told them about roots, about patience, about growing things slowly. "You can't rush something that needs time," she said, her voice clear in the audio feed. "Just like you can't rush feelings. They grow when you take care of them." I felt a heaviness in my chest again. That woman had a way of saying things so simply that they hit like a freight train. Around lunchtime, I went downstairs under the excuse of grabbing a water bottle, but really just to see it with my own eyes. They were washing their hands at the sink, and she had them sing some little song to make sure they scrubbed long enough. Then I noticed something else. My kids were smiling. Not the forced smiles they gave in family photos or when adults told them to be nice. These were real, soft, unguarded, the kind I hadn't seen since before the accident. I turned away quickly when I felt my eyes sting. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. It was small, almost insignificant, but it pierced straight through me. Lily walked into my office without knocking. Normally I would have corrected her, but the look on her face froze me. "Daddy, can you draw with us?" she asked. I stared at her, unsure what to say. "I'm working." "Oh," she whispered, her face dropping just slightly. "Okay." She turned to leave, and I felt it, that silence the nanny had mentioned. The cold, hollow space between a parent and a child who has stopped expecting warmth. "Wait," I said. my voice breaking in a way I didn't recognize. "I'll come for a few minutes." Her face lit up as if I'd just given her the world. I followed her downstairs, where the other three were sprawled across the living room floor with crayons and papers. They barely acknowledged me, and honestly, I didn't blame them. I had been a ghost in their lives for too long. Elena glanced at me, surprised but not intrusive. "We're drawing our favorite memories," she said, "something that made us feel safe once." My stomach dropped. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. I sat with them on the carpet. My knees cracked embarrassingly loud, but the kids didn't laugh. They just scooted closer one by one as if remembering I existed. I picked up a crayon, and then I saw what they were drawing. All four of them were drawing their mother, in every picture. Emily smiling, Emily hugging them, Emily cooking, Emily singing, Emily holding their hands. Not one picture included me. My throat tightened, and a light-headed wave hit me. I forced a breath and leaned forward, pretending to focus on my own drawing. In truth, I was terrified they would notice the piece of me falling apart inside. Eventually, the kids wandered to another activity, leaving their drawings scattered across the floor. I stayed there, staring at their little scribbles, feeling the weight of every missed bedtime, every ignored tantrum, every moment I had chosen work instead of presence. Then something caught my eye. It was a piece of paper on the coffee table. Not a drawing, a letter. In a child's shaky handwriting, "Mum, I miss you. I'm mad that you left. I don't know why Dad cries in the car. I wish he would talk to us." I picked it up with trembling hands. Before I could process it, Elena sat quietly beside me on the floor. She didn't touch me or try to comfort me. She just sat there. "They asked if they could write letters," she said softly. "I didn't make them." "I didn't know," I whispered. "They didn't either. They didn't have words for what they were feeling. Sometimes kids need help finding the words." I swallowed hard. You did this." "No," she said. "They did. I just made space for it." I stared at the letter again and felt something inside me crack open, something I'd been holding shut so tightly for so long that I forgot it was even there. Shame, grief, guilt, fear, love, all tangled together. I should have thanked her, but instead my head filled with instinctive defensiveness. I don't want them reliving the trauma. Maybe it's better if... "Talking about pain doesn't make pain bigger," she said gently. "Silence does." Her words hit so deep I felt winded. I stood up abruptly, overwhelmed. "I need to work," I said, though I had no intention of opening my laptop. I escaped to my office and closed the door, breathing hard, trying to pull myself back together. I told myself she was crossing boundaries. I told myself she was digging too deep. I told myself she didn't understand my family, my kids, my life. But the truth was louder. She was doing what I had been too afraid to do. She was helping them feel. That night, long after the kids were asleep, I checked the cameras again. I watched her quietly pick up each drawing from the floor, smoothing the edges as if they were fragile. Then she did something that made my breath stop. She placed all the letters the kids wrote to their mother into a small wooden box, one I hadn't seen since Emily died. It had been hers. She must have found it in the closet or a drawer. She closed the box, placed her hand gently on top of it, and whispered something I couldn't hear. At that moment, something shifted inside me again. Not anger, not fear. Something unfamiliar, something like gratitude, or maybe shame, or maybe both. All I knew was that Elena wasn't just cleaning my house. She was cleaning the dust off my children's hearts. And whether I liked it or not, mine too. I didn't sleep much the night after the incident at the school. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing my son sitting alone on that curb, knees pulled to his chest, tears streaking the dust on his cheeks. And beside him, calm and patient, was Elena, breathing slowly with him, whispering reassurance, letting him unravel at his own pace. I kept replaying how he had clung to her instead of me when I arrived, not because he didn't love me, but because I had never shown him how to fall apart safely in my presence. The truth was hard to swallow. I had tried to solve everything with toys, private tutors, expensive programs, and more staff than any household needed, but I had never given my children the one thing that couldn't be bought: myself. The next morning, I went downstairs earlier than usual. I expected to see the kids eating breakfast or arguing over cereal, but instead I found them sitting in a circle on the living room rug with small bowls of water and paintbrushes. Elena sat with them, guiding them as they dipped their brushes into water and painted invisible strokes on construction paper. "What are you doing?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. "It's disappearing art," she said. "It teaches patience, control, and that not everything has to be permanent to be meaningful." The kids were focused, truly focused, in a way I had never seen. No tantrums, no screaming, no competition, just breathing and quiet concentration. "Can I try?" I asked before I could stop myself. 4 little heads snapped toward me in surprise. "You want to paint with us?" Lily asked, eyes wide, as if the idea was unheard of. "Yes," I said, clearing my throat, "if that's okay." They nodded eagerly and shifted to make space for me. I sat awkwardly at first, my knees popping again, which made them giggle. But once I dipped the brush into the bowl of water, something strange happened. I felt present, fully present. For the first time in years, we painted for almost 15 minutes, nothing meaningful, no masterpiece, just quiet strokes on paper that vanished as they dried. But it felt like something bigger than it looked, like time finally slowing down enough for me to breathe with them, not around them. Afterward, Elena stood to gather the supplies. I helped without thinking, picking up bowls and stacking papers. Our hands brushed for a moment, and instead of pulling back, she met my eyes. "They've missed you," she said softly. "I know," I whispered. "I've missed them too." There was no judgment in her expression, only truth, only reflection. Later that afternoon, I made a decision that terrified me more than anything I had done in business. I called my assistant and cleared my entire schedule for the rest of the week. Meetings, investor calls, product briefings, all cancelled. I even told her to notify my COO that I would be unreachable for at least several hours each day. When I hung up, my heart raced, as if I had just jumped off a cliff. I wasn't sure if I had made a brave choice or a reckless one. But the moment I walked back downstairs and saw the kids sprawled on the floor building a puzzle, together, not fighting, not screaming, I knew I had made the right one. "Daddy, come help," one of the boys shouted. I did. Piece by piece, the puzzle grew. Piece by piece, something in me loosened. Piece by piece, I stepped back into a role I had abandoned out of fear. The next few days were transformative in ways I didn't expect. Not perfect, not magical, but real. I helped pack lunches. I walked them to the car for school. I cooked dinner with Elena instead of hiding in my office. I learned that Lily hates melted cheese, that Noah collects shiny rocks, that Ethan is terrified of thunderstorms, and that Ava sleeps with a stuffed rabbit she hides in her pillowcase so no one thinks she's a baby. I learned more about my children in 3 days than I had in 3 years, but growth never comes without friction. One evening while we were finishing dinner, one of the boys knocked over a glass of juice. The liquid spread across the table, dripping onto the floor. Normally, this would have triggered screaming, accusations, maybe even a tantrum, but the kids froze, waiting for someone to explode. I was about to sigh and say, "Seriously?" when I caught myself. Instead, I heard Elena's earlier words echo in my mind. Talking about pain doesn't make pain bigger. Silence does. So I took a breath. "It's okay," I said gently. "Accidents happen. Let's clean it together." The quadruplets stared at me like I had grown a second head. "You're not mad?" Ethan asked quietly. "No," I said. "Not this time." And then something extraordinary happened. They cleaned it, with me. A small thing, but everything at once. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, I walked into the kitchen and found Eleanor putting away dishes. She looked tired, actual tired, not defeated tired, which is what every nanny before her had become. "I owe you an apology," I said. She turned, drying her hands on a towel. "For what?" "For assuming you were overstepping, for judging you, for all of it." "You were protecting yourself," she said. "Pain does that." "Still," I said, shaking my head, "you deserved better." She studied me for a moment. "Your children don't just need someone to care for them. They need someone to show them how to care for themselves. And that starts with you doing the same." Her words hit me deeply, not like criticism, but like truth I had been avoiding, and for once I didn't run from it. "Will you stay?" I asked. "Not as a maid, as part of the family rhythm. Whatever you've been doing, it's working, and I've been failing without even realizing how badly." She hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of caution. Then she nodded slowly. "I'll stay," she said. "But only if you keep showing up. Not perfectly, just honestly." "I will," I promised. And for the first time, I meant it in the deepest way. The next morning was Saturday, and instead of sleeping in or hiding in my office, I gathered the kids and drove them to a place I had avoided since the funeral. The cemetery. They held my hands tightly, 2 on each side, as we approached their mother's stone. I knelt with them, I cried with them, I talked to Emily out loud for the first time in years. I apologized to her for disappearing, and I told our children stories about her. Funny ones, sweet ones, messy ones, stories I had locked away because they hurt too much to remember. But remembering them together didn't hurt. It healed, piece by piece. When we got back home, the kids ran ahead to show Eleanor the flowers they had picked for their mother's grave. She listened to every word, kneeling to their height, validating their feelings like they were the most important emotions in the world. And maybe they were. That night, after bedtime, I stood in the hallway, listening to Elena tuck them in. She spoke to each one individually, whispering words I couldn't quite make out, but felt deeply. When she stepped out, she found me leaning against the wall. "You're good with them," I said softly. "So are you," she replied. "You just forgot." I swallowed hard. I think I forgot a lot of things. Then it's time to remember. We stood in a quiet hallway illuminated by a single nightlight, and I realized something profound, not about her, but about us. This wasn't about a maid fixing a broken family. This was about a family learning to breathe again, and I was finally inhaling. Weeks passed. We built routines. We created new memories. We learned each other's rhythms. The kids changed, not into perfect children, but into children who felt safe enough to express themselves without exploding. And I changed, not into a perfect father, but into one who finally understood that love isn't measured in money or gifts or stability. It's measured in presence, in showing up, in sitting in the discomfort until it becomes strength. One night, as I tucked them in myself, something I hadn't done in years, Lily looked up at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Daddy, are you staying this time?" My chest tightened, but I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "I'm staying." And I did. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but fully. When I stepped outside their room, I found Elena waiting with a soft smile. I didn't know what our future looked like, not for her, not for me, not for us, but I knew one thing: she hadn't just changed my children. She had changed me, and when I looked back at everything that had happened, everything we had lived through, everything we had begun healing together, I understood something I had forgotten long ago. Nothing changes until someone chooses to change inside first, and that someone had finally been me. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story, and if you've ever struggled with family, with loss, with rebuilding from the inside out, tell me in the comments. I'll be reading everyone, and if you want more stories like this, real ones, raw ones, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Maybe this story touched something in you, and if it did, tell me. When was the moment you realized someone in your life needed you to show up again?